From Studio 3 at Buzz TV, it's The Horse's Mouth with Tom McManus.
All right, time once again for Up Close and Personal here on The Horse's Mouth. Of course, we're back at Tommy Mac's, back at the bar, and brought to you by Daily Ad Brief. My guest this time around, Jeanine Hoff. How are you, Jeanine?
Hi, how are you?
Welcome to the bar.
Yeah, this is the first time I've actually done an interview in a bar.
All right, good. Nice and calming effect, right? We're relaxed,
this is kind of more my speed, yeah.
All right, tell me about Where is the Sunshine?
So we started about 2016, focusing on mental health advocacy, and in the last year or two, we've kind of shifted our focus to really focus on suicide prevention.
Okay, wow.
And suicide prevention across the board.
Yep.
Suicide work and suicide prevention work is not just a mental health issue.
Okay.
What we've learned is the CDC actually has a stat that 54% of suicides are related to people who don't have a mental health diagnosis. So more than half have some other kind of factor, whether they're not diagnosed or some other life, factors happening around them. So we kind of shifted to work on that aspect. What is causing people to die by suicide? And what are the causes? It could be job loss. It could be family issues, relationship issues, breakups, divorces, those kinds of things.
Sure, absolutely. How'd you get started?
So I'm a lived experience advocate, and I'm also a clinician. Okay. So I was someone who struggled with mental health several years ago. Okay. And as I had to go through this system and fight the system, now I recognize I'm someone with a lot of privilege, who had the insurance, who had all the support, the family, and everything. And I found it incredibly daunting and incredibly difficult, even just to get appointments and such. Okay. And I got to the point that I was in crisis as well. And after going through all of that, I realized I was like, this is a problem. Not just here in Jacksonville, it is a problem everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a lot of disconnect between the systems, right? And so I was like, I'm going to put my effort into that advocacy world. And by doing that, I became a peer specialist. I started working with other people who have lived experiences, working with people in crisis, people who were struggling with mental health, but also people who were feeling suicidal. And then from there, I said, you know what, if I'm going to tackle this world, I have to be in it as well, and I became a clinician. So I became a therapist that way.
You deal with all kinds of patients, right? Children, adults, teenagers, everything.
Everyone.
Wow.
And that's the interesting thing. So I will work with kids who are suicidal, but kids who also have other crises in their lives as well. Okay. With trauma, with child abuse and such. And I also work with adults as well. Right. I work with seniors, you name it. And that's the thing, the population I see is so diverse, and everyone has their own story and their own journey and their own struggle that we don't see, and it's all happening right here in Jacksonville. Yeah. And so a lot of the advocacy work that I do in the education programs and the speaking and the trainings I started doing outside of Jacksonville. I'm traveling, but the clinical work that I do here, I mean, every single day. Yeah. I mean, I'm bombarded with just calls and with people and issues where people are just struggling and they're having a hard time and they don't have access to services. It's hard to get a therapist or a doctor. And so we provide, resources. We provide referral information, educational information. Okay. We help people advocate for themselves. Yeah. And as a clinician, I'm providing them the service in crisis. I work in inpatient psychiatric. Okay. And so that I'm one-on-one with them all day.
How do you, and I'm not trying to, I'm not insensitive. It's a big issue, but how do you differentiate, like someone that's been abused that has mental health issues, as opposed to someone that loses their job or gains weight? Or, I don't want to call it self-inflicted, but you know what I mean? It's not from someone else, abusing you as a youngster or what have you. Do you differentiate that? Is there a difference, or is there not a difference?
There's not really a difference. It just matters how a person interprets their experiences and how they process it. We have seen children, we have seen adults who have had serious trauma and go on to great success and have no issues whatsoever. No doubt.
doubt.
They kind of figure things out, or they get the support. And then we see people who have zero trauma in their lives, and then they have a crisis. It really depends on a lot of factors. It depends on their support system.
You treat it the same, though.
Yep, we treat it the same.
Thing. That's what I'm sorry. That's what I was trying to ask. Okay.
Because it's really individualized care. It's really about the person and getting them whatever it is that they need. I was one of those people. I didn't have trauma. I didn't have any of those experiences, and yet I fell into crisis.
Right. Which can happen to anybody.
It can happen to anyone. It can happen to
anybody at any given time, that's for sure. When you think of because you hear more and more about mental health these days, which is needed, right? For sure. My mother, who's 91, she's a retired RN, and during her training, she worked at mental hospital in New Jersey. And she always says, she's like, that was one of the downfalls when we started closing those institutions for people. That was a bad thing for us to happen. A, do you agree with that? And B, will the hospitals ever, or those institutions ever come back? Will they make a comeback for our mental health? Challenge people.
Do I agree? When they shut down the institutions, that was through JFK, and the plan was to put the resources back into the communities and get people deinstitutionalized and get them services where they were at.
Okay.
That never came to fruition. Okay. So what you ended up with, and I mean, I could go through the whole history, but you ended up with like the criminalization of the mentally ill in the 70s and 80s. These people had nowhere to go. There were no resources. They weren't there.
Right.
And so, was it good back then? No, it was absolutely awful.
Right. But what they did in them, I know they did.
Yeah, it was pretty terrible.
I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. It was just more like a setting where they had somewhere to go like that.
And there are places like that now, but they are incredibly expensive. And when I'm talking about like $60,000 to $100,000 for a month of treatment, and so. I mean, there are challenges.
That infuriates me, by the way. That drives me. Whether it's dealing with the veterans or anybody that needs help, to make it cost, that's ridiculous. It's practically, you can't afford it, right? And
so, I mean, we couldn't afford it. Like, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And people and so people who don't have that access, people don't have that support of those financial means, they tend to struggle even more because they don't have, ways to get treatment. So, I mean, are there places? Is it helpful? Yeah, it could be if the person wants the treatment, if they're willing to go in and they're doing it on their own accord, right? We here in Florida and in other places, when a person's in crisis, we call the cops. They get hospitalized against their will, and it they get Baker acted. And
are you surprised I knew that term?
You know what? It's not a common term, but
thank you. Not bad for a meathead linebacker, bartender.
Yeah. So for me, I work with people who are Baker acted all day, all night, and it's hard for them. They're given misinformation, and they're like, I'm supposed to be here 3 days, and then they end up having to be there longer. And so we try to make it as easy as we can on them and provide them with all the support and comfort that they need. But still, it's the system. It will take a lot to fix the system. It has to be completely revamped. Okay.
So as we wrap up here real quick, what you shared some data before the show that the veteran suicides are down. We've talked about all the issues. Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Are things getting better for mental health patients and whatnot?
In certain ways, there are improvements. Like I said, the data from 2019, because data is 2 years behind, for veterans actually showed a significant decrease in veteran suicide. What we are seeing right now is an increase in calls to like veteran hotlines and such. Same with the preliminary data for suicides in general. We've seen a dip, but we are getting more calls. Which is a good thing because that people are recognizing.
They know there's resources.
Yes, and that they are recognizing that there are resources and that they need help. The problem is there's only X amount of us to go around.
Right.
Is there light at the tunnel? I think there can be. I think that people are much more comfortable talking about this little by little. It is Suicide Prevention Month.
Yep.
And so you will see resources all around the community and all over nationwide, social media, people sharing ways to get support if you're in crisis. And I do think that eventually, I hope that there's a light.
Well, a lot of it is, I think, them knowing about it. And hopefully this show can help people know about what you're doing with Where is the Sunshine? Jeanine, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
You're doing the Lord's work, man. That's great.
I'm trying.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. That'll do it for us on Up Close and Personal. Brought to you by Daily Ad Brief and right here at the Tommy Max Bar. What a great place it is. Until next time, stay safe and be cool. We'll see you right here on The Horse's Mouth.